The Last of Us Part 2 is not that bad. It's just not the story that you wanted. Shut the fuck up, stop being a bitch. The end. Now, there's definitely a lot more to it, and I do want to get into it, but before I do that, I just want to give you guys a spoiler warning. There definitely will be spoilers about The Last of Us Part 2. Duh. If you, for some reason, don't want to get spoiled, but you want to watch this video, this is your last chance to click away, because I'm going to start spoiling it in 3, 2, 1, and Joel gets killed. At least I warned you, right? So, let's talk about it. The Last of Us Part 2 is one of, if not the most anticipated sequel of this console generation. I can't think of a game that's come out on the PS4 and Xbox One that has been more anticipated than The Last of Us Part 2. Even games that have really, really big franchises like Red Dead Redemption or fucking GTA or anything like that, or Call of Duty, I still think that The Last of Us Part 2 is hands down the most anticipated sequel of this console generation, and for good merit, for a good reason, you know, because The Last of Us Part 1 was fantastic, and honestly, the way it was left off, it was pretty damn open-ended, you know, and I think that us as a community of gamers, and just people in general, we like to make our own stories and fan fiction in our head, and nowadays, if we're so empowered and we're so entitled to having everything satisfy us personally, if something doesn't work or doesn't turn out the way that we want it to, we throw a tantrum and we say it's the worst thing ever. But we don't take the time to sit there and think, oh, wait a minute, that might make a little bit of sense. This story is one of those moments. Now, granted, I don't think The Last of Us Part 2 is a perfect game like the first one. I don't think it holds a candle to the first one, honestly, when it comes to story. But it's not because our favorite characters die or get hurt or that we let Abby live it all in the end. That's not why I think it's a bad story. I think that the story is boring because the characters, not just the new characters that they bring in, but hell, even our old characters that we know, like Ellie herself with her new girlfriend, they're so fucking shallow. Like, am I the only one that felt that way? Like, the story just felt shallow because the characters, they look amazing. Obviously, the graphics are fantastic, probably the best looking game on this generation of consoles, and yet the characters just have no substance whatsoever aside from surface value. It's really, really weird, and that's just my opinion on it. But the characters' substance aside, the story and the idea of the story is brilliant, in my opinion. And as somebody who didn't really play The Last of Us Part 1 in the beginning, I played it later on. I want to say I've only played it like 2 years ago, so it's kind of still fresh in my mind. But I didn't play it like a bunch. I played it one time. I thought it was fantastic, but I'm not really a story guy person. I'm more of a multiplayer person, so I didn't really like fangirl over the sequel like a lot of other people did. So I guess I came into it with a more open mind than a lot of the people who were really anticipating this since the release of the first Last of Us game. However, I still think that there are some issues with this game. I think that the story isn't as bad as people are making it seem. I think The Last of Us Part 2 has a solid idea for a story. A dual-sided story that makes you feel bad, or at least tries to make you feel bad, for both characters, both sides of the spectrum. Here you have Ellie on one spectrum, who is our main character, or one of our main characters in the first Last of Us game. We have so much history with her. We know the pain that she went through, and we got to watch her father figure in Joel die right in front of her very eyes, in front of our very eyes, in the first like 2 hours of gameplay for this sequel, right? It's insane. It was very off guard, and that hurts. What also hurts is watching the story of Abby. And Abby, who is the killer of Joel, the killer of Ellie's father figure, is also in a lot of pain this game, and throughout this game you figure out why. You know, it's the reason why she kills Joel in the first place is because Joel is the one who killed her father, who was the doctor who was trying to use Ellie as a cure to save the world in the first game. It makes 100% sense from Abby's perspective why she's so angry, why she killed Joel. Obviously, from the fans' perspective, it still feels like we were betrayed, but from her perspective, it makes the most sense. It is a brilliant idea. The execution is not great, but it is a brilliant preface for a fucking sequel. I think if people were to take out the past history that we have with these characters, you know, if we were to forget all the stuff that we knew about Ellie and Joel and Tommy and Jesse in the first game, and if we were to just start a clean slate and not give a fuck about any of these characters to begin with and just play the game, I think that we would soon realize that The Last of Us Part 2 is a fantastic game that shows two sides to a very complex story. And what you realize as you play is neither of these characters are right for the way that they handle these situations. Obviously, the way that Abby just brutally murdered Joel, she didn't just shoot him in the face, she fucking slaughtered that man. It's fucked up. It's also fucked up the way that Joel killed her father. And it's also fucked up the way that Ellie kills her friends later on in the story. It's all fucked up. And none of them are 100% justified because from someone else's perspective, they're always wrong in some sort of way. Obviously, Ellie's stuff looks more justified from our eyes because we're the fans who have been with her longer and we understand her pain more. But as this game goes on, you also see the pain of Abby, and you can also understand, like, if you were in that position, what would you do? If you had the power to get revenge on somebody that you know did something to your family, would you do it? Of course you would. I don't blame Abby for it. I don't forgive her for it as a fan of Ellie and Joel, but I understand it. I understand it after seeing her story throughout this game, seeing her friends, understanding her connection with her dad. Everything's just really clear to me, and it's understandable because if I were in those shoes, I know for a fact I would want revenge as well. And I think everybody watching this video, and even the people hating all over Twitter and Reddit and shitting on Neil Druckmann and all that shit, like, they would understand and they would do the exact same thing that Abby did if they were ever in that situation. I think they would. It's pretty fucking obvious. Who wouldn't? You know, family is one of the most important things in this world. Just like Ellie was really important to Joel, I'm pretty sure that Abby had the same idea in her mind for her father. So it all makes sense. So why do people not like The Last of Us Part 2? Why do people shit on the story so much? Because really, the reason why people are shitting on this game is not for the gameplay. The gameplay is super innovative, revolutionary. The settings are fantastic. You can literally put custom keybinds throughout your entire controller. It's amazing. It's fantastic. However, why do people still hate it? It's getting the most hate I've ever seen out of a video game in a while. So let's talk about why that is. If you ask me, I believe there's two main reasons why The Last of Us 2 is getting so much hate and backlash from the fans. I think that the developers did a terrible job. And the developers, if you guys don't know, they're Naughty Dog. If you ask me, they're one of the most underrated developers we have in the gaming industry today. And I think, even though they're so great and they've made a bunch of fantastic games now, they fucked up. They fucked up bad when it comes to marketing this game and advertising it. Because if you guys watch the trailer for The Last of Us 2, the reveal trailers and the snippets and the teasers and all that shit, the way they try to frame the story and help the player and the audience guess what happens in the story before the game was released, the story that they were telling in the trailers is completely different than what the story we had in the game was. I think that in itself can make people pretty pissed off, but it didn't really piss me off because honestly, me being a player and not the fucking developer, I have no idea the story that they were trying to tell in the first place with the first game, let alone what they want to do with their sequel. So I'm not mad at them for changing up the trailers because honestly, it's pretty much the same thing that movies do nowadays when it comes to movies that don't want to get spoiled. If you guys are Marvel fans, Avengers Endgame, they did the exact same thing. They changed up the trailer to make it look like certain characters were in different outfits than they were in the actual movie. And the reason they do that is to avoid spoilers and to avoid getting rid of the shock value of the actual game. I understand that, but I also can understand why the audience would be pissed because this is one of the first games where that's actually happened, where it's a big marquee game that everybody's hyped about. And they not only give you reveal trailers that are misleading, but it's so misleading that you would think it's a completely different story that's going to be told. That's crazy. It's innovative and it's genius, but it's crazy. I give them props for even trying to do that, because most people don't have the balls to try that. And one would say that it may or may not have backlash on them, but they made a lot of money off of it, so whatever. The second reason why people are hating on this game is because, let's be honest, nowadays people are way too entitled, guys. Us as gamers and just fans in general, we think that the story has to go exactly the way we want it to, exactly the way we dream it to, the way that we write it out on those Reddit posts. Because if it doesn't, then that means that the fucking people, the creators of this story, don't have the same mind as us. But if you ask me, I think that's the beauty of storytelling. Storytelling is so vast and it's so complex that you can make a bunch of different stories from the exact same premise, and it will all make sense. It can all make sense depending on who's telling it, what type of details you put into it. And if you ask me, I think they did a great job at diverting expectations with The Last of Us 2. If you don't like those expectations, that's fine, but I think it's a pretty good idea. I think they did a great job at diverting expectations, giving you a story that wasn't so predictable, and just really giving us a story that was interesting and not just straight up catering to fans. I think nowadays people like to play the safe route a little bit too much when it comes to storytelling, and The Last of Us 2 does not do that. This is not only a game that gives you shock value, this is just a straight up brutal game. There is nothing about this game that is super nice and happy-go-lucky. Everything in this game is brutal. The death scenes, the fighting scenes, the zombies are way more fucking aggressive. Like, everything in this game is just straight up in your face and crazy, the story included. And I think that's why a lot of people are caught off guard. But me personally, I don't think The Last of Us 2 is as bad as people make it seem. Are there issues? Yes, but it's not the worst thing that ever happened to the world. If you guys agree with me, let me know down below. Even if you disagree, let me know down below how you feel in the comments section. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and yeah, catch you guys later. Bye.